Hi everyone. Let's see if this is working. Feel like it should be going live. Still trying to figure this whole thing out a little bit. Just see. I'll let you stare at my beautiful face for a few seconds until I figure out if it's actually doing stuff. Cool. All right. I believe I am up and running. That's exciting. All right. Hopefully the lag's not too unbearable. Cool. All right. So today, yeah. All right. I'm alive. Oh wow, there's people watching. This is exciting. Hello everyone. I'm Nick Cartwright, and today I'm going to be doing some photo editing. Yay! Okay, so I'm going to share my whole screen with you guys so you can see what I'm going to be up to today. And yeah, we're going to get this thing started. As I said, today I'm going to be streaming photo editing, people's faces, things like that. So yeah. All right. Oh, here's my infinity screen. I'm going to minimize that. Okay, and we're going to go like this. I'm going to bring up your comments here, just so I can see what y'all are saying. My dog's going to come visit for a second. Hey, Coco. And yeah, so this is just a photo I shot at a wedding about what was it now, like a week or two ago now, and yeah, I've got a whole like 700 photos from this wedding here, but I like this one. This is kind of fun, cute. They really like this fireplace out there, so I really wanted to get it shot. Shot it at night. One thing I'm looking at is the skin tones. Let's see, it's gonna sharpen. Okay, actually, no, I might choose a different photo just for today. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting used to this whole program here, so bear with me. If there's people viewing, who do I have? How many people? I've got, it says 16 people. That's exciting. If I know you, drop a comment, say hello. But let's see. So I had more of a plan my first time around, so this time, mostly it's just going to be me doing edits and stuff, and y'all can ask questions. I'll try to talk through a little bit, but I'm going to try not to go super crazy. Let's actually try one of these photos from outside. I'll do this. Okay, I'm going to do this shot, actually. Oops. All right. So this is all the groomsmen from the wedding party. There they are. Look at them. They all look lovely. But one thing you start to notice is throughout this photo, you got like it was so cold outside when we did the shot. It was like -3 degrees, and we've been out there for like 15 minutes already. Everyone's got really pink, flush, cold faces and stuff. And so one thing I want to try to combat a little bit when in my editing is getting rid of that. So just I want to still make it look natural, and I don't want to lose the texture in their faces upon editing. So that's going to be the big goal, is to try to make their faces look a little less, pained from the cold and a little bit more natural, without, airbrushing them, making them look like plastic dolls. So that is the plan there. So I'm going to start off. I start off in Lightroom as always. And just do a couple of quick edits, and then bring it into Photoshop, and that's where we're going to have lots of fun. So right now I'm just going to mess around with some sliders here as usual. I don't want to add too much exposure, but I do want to start bringing out a little bit of these darks in their coats and things. So I'm going to raise up my shadows, which are the lighter darks. They're already more visible darks. Your blacks are your darkest darks. And I'm actually going to bring those down a little bit just to create a little bit of contrast. And I'm going to bring my whites down a little bit. It really affects the sky and some of the highlights on their face, so it doesn't blow out their face too much. And as if any of you watched last time, clarity is kind of a weird thing. It's like a poor man's sharpening tool. And you see, if you raise clarity all the way, it looks really scary. Some people love this look. To me, on skin tones, it looks incredibly unnatural. But I usually like to add a little bit, just to kind of, it's basically splits your midtones a little bit and makes it look sharper by creating harder edges. And if you notice, it brings out a little bit of texture and detail, which I think is important to a lot of photos, and just subtle clarity is a nice thing I like to use. So we will move on from there. Saturation I want to avoid, mainly because I'm going to be saturating their faces a whole lot, because their faces are already so red. And even vibrance. Vibrance takes your more brighter color, like your brighter colors, and saturates those and avoids neutrals. But at the same time, that's a lot of color in their face, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. I'm not going to deal with that. You come down to these sliders. I'm going to try to just mess around a little bit with these. I like bringing up the highlights, kind of makes them pop a little bit when you use the highlights from the histogram here. All right, so I like this. Now in Lightroom, there's a couple quick fixes you could do if you really want to get rid of that color in people's faces a lot faster, but it's going to be slightly unnatural. So one thing you can do is grab the luminance here, and you can raise it up, and notice how it's the brightness of the color red. So if I raise it up, the reds start to disappear, but again, they look kind of bleached out and a little bit odd. I don't mind doing it just a hair though. Kind of eases off on it, or you could lower red saturation. Problem with doing that is that the rest of the image, there's a lot of red on this tractor and on the barn and stuff, and I don't want to lose that color red. So a lot of the edits that I'm going to be doing to the reds are more localized. All right, so let us take this. I like where it's at right now. The rest of what I want to do to this image can happen in Photoshop. So let's see here. I'm going to just bring this into Adobe Photoshop. And it takes a second here usually. And voila, here's the image. All these really cool looking groomsmen leaning around the tractor and stuff. All right, so we'll take this. One thing I like to do in Photoshop is I edit with as little, I do non-destructive editing as much as I possibly can, meaning that any edit I make, I can always go back and, to the original and, and not have it affect the entire image, or not have to undo a billion times to get back to what I wanted. So I always start by making a second layer. I just do that with Command-J on a Mac. Again, I always get a little confused because I don't really do a lot of PC, but would imagine it's Control J, because like 90% of the time it's you substitute Control, or you just add like an extra step or like another button or something. But yeah, so Command J just copies the exact layer that you're on, makes a new one. All right, so that's the first thing I'll do. And then the next thing that I'm going to start doing, I like to, before I start getting into color and a lot of crazy details and stuff, I like to affect exposure. So any of you who watched last time, you should go check it out if you haven't, because I talked about making luminosity masks. And last time I broke it down step by step. This time, however, I am just going to click the Photoshop action that I have created that essentially makes luminosity masks for me. And the benefit of luminosity masks is that you can basically make like a bunch of different channels over here that are divided based on brightness. So I'll show you in a second here. I'll just play my action, and a lot of things happening. It's basically creating these new channels, asking me if I want to rename them. I'm just holding down Enter so that it goes through that quickly. But yeah, it's creating all these different channels for me. As you can see, all the marching ants showing up with selections, and voila, now I have done my luminosity masks. I also notice in the actions, I actually have it set to create a new layer in the first place, just because I do always edit non-destructively. I don't need that second layer though, so I'm just going to get rid of it. But yeah, so if you see here, I'm going to Command D to deselect, and each of these channels is divided up by brightness. And notice how as I click down these, it's separating the lightest lights further and further. It's kind of honing in on the brightest brights, and then vice versa. I have it go to the darkest darks, and then all of the midtones here. So it's nice and divided, and with this, I can make selections without having to paint in between all these areas and the trees up here and stuff like that. I can make a selection based on the brightest areas of the image. Now, in this case, the sky is actually kind of already a nice rich blue. So it's kind of falling almost to my midtones. And if you remember as well, when making a mask, because I can basically apply this exact image as my layer mask, depending on what I have selected here. And the whiter it is, the more it's going to show through when I edit it. So right now, the sky is not going to be affected at all because it's pure black, and vice versa. I'm being telephoned. 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. Right, so as I was saying, all right, let me just see here really quick. Sorry. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, so we got these nice different layers here. Each one, as I was saying, the lighter it is on the selection, the more it's going to show through when I edit. So if I want to edit only my sky, or as much of, or by singling out the sky as much as possible, got to find one where the sky is light, but most everything else is not. And actually, I really don't know if I really need to edit the sky a whole lot, just because it is the right blue that I want. But I guess I'm gonna try to affect more of the shadows here inside their coats. That's what I really want to bring up right now. So I'm gonna get this layer here. Notice how these darker parts of the coats are pure white, whereas these other parts here are kind of a medium gray. Somebody's saying they've not seen my stream. Hold on. No. It should be going. Just check my Facebook too, make sure. Cool. All right. All right, so this image that I'm selecting here, if I hold down Command and click on this channel, notice these marching ants here. It's actually selecting the entire image, but again, anything that's over 50% selected, it's like if the selection is over 50% opacity or yeah, it will have these little running ants around it. So now I've made this selection. I'm gonna go back up to my RGB channel, and you can see it is selected on all of them. Go back into my layers, and I'm gonna create an adjustment mask. So to do that, I'm just gonna come down here and click adjustment, and I'm gonna do a curves adjustment first. And curves gives you a lot of control over the different areas within your selection. So this is only affecting the darks, because remember on a histogram, the farthest left is dark. And notice how, since I've got mostly my dark selected, the peak over here on this is all dark. Oh, there you are. Hi, Kelsey. I don't know why I typed that also, but hi. Yeah. Scooch this over a little bit so I can see what's going on. It's too far. Cool. All right. How are you today, Kelsey? Doing good? Are you going to stream later? All right, we'll wait for that response. But let's see. So over here again, once like the peak over here is in the shadows. So I'm affecting these particular shadows. If I grab over here, I'm affecting the highlights within my selection, which is almost nothing. It's just the brightest areas of the image, and it's barely affected. And again, midtones are mostly not present in my selection, since all of the detail of the selection, as you can see, is really heavily weighted towards the darks. I'm just going to grab that's fair. I'll just keep typing to you anyways in case you don't have it on. Okay, yeah, perfect. So let's see here. I put a little point here at the midtones so that as I'm dragging around the shadows, it doesn't affect anything else, and it's just about the shadows here. So I'm going to try to bring up a little bit of detail in the shadows because it's getting a little dark and a little bit too contrasty for me. You know, you can tell it's a really hard sunlight. It's like late afternoon. So I'm just going to raise these up a wee bit. Just to my liking, and I'm liking that. So I just affected the shadows there, and then we're gonna come back. I like this barn here is super red, but I think a lot of it's getting a little bit blown out, and I'm not a fan of that. So I'm gonna go back in my channels. I'm gonna pick one that has a bit more detail up in the barn, and like I said, you can kind of single it out a little bit more. And I'm liking this one here. Actually, yeah, I'll go with this one. Because I don't want to affect their faces too much, but I don't mind if they get a little bit affected here. So I'm going to command click onto this luminosity mask. Again, if anyone has questions about how to make those masks, these channels, I mean, by all means, you can message me here. You can find me on Facebook at Nick Cartwright, or you could find my photography page, nickcartwrightphoto.com, anything like that. And send me a message, and I can get back to you on explaining it, or you can always go check back at my first ever live stream here on Watch Me Work and just watch how I did it. But yeah, all right, so we're gonna take this new selection, we're gonna hop back into our photo, and I wanna bring down the highlights. So I'm gonna do a curves again, and I'm just gonna lower the highlights up in here. And again, I'm gonna put a point at our midtones just because I don't wanna affect those a whole lot. But as you see, as I'm dragging down the highlights, I don't want them to come flat and dead like that. But I can definitely bring back a bit of color into them. So voila, I have done so. I don't know if you want to see the difference. Actually, no, I overdid it. I'm gonna hang out about, oops. I'm gonna hang out around there, and yeah, right here. But as I'm turning this layer off and on again, I'm actually not a big fan of what happened to their faces. So I'm actually going to go onto this layer here, which is mostly black, but I am going to add black to my layer in order to paint in over their faces and cover up basically the adjustment we just made. That's a crazy brush to have. I was doing some weird Photoshop stuff earlier today, or actually yesterday. So I got this black brush now. I'm going to paint it back onto their faces to bring back those nicer looking highlights that were on their faces that gave them a little bit more life. Right now I have a semi-low flow on my brush, which is really important. If you're using like, especially using a tablet, flow is just like the amount of paint on your brush, if that makes any sense. And the lower it is, the more times you have to paint over an area for it to become fully black. And I like it because it blends a lot better than using opacity. I know a lot of people use opacity all the time, but as I kind of illustrated in the last tutorial I did, I'll show you the difference between a low opacity and a low flow. So opacity here, if I paint, oops, let's do black instead. It'll look a little bit better. If I paint black, right? Every time I do another brush stroke, you can see the clear areas where it overlaps. And that looks really ugly, especially if you're trying to hide the editing, which is really important in editing. You don't really want people to know that you have been editing. Like, it should still look like a natural image. So that, yeah, so instead of doing that, what I'm gonna do instead is, if you use flow at a low rate, there we go, and you start painting in, like, notice how it starts to bleed together just a little bit smoother. And 16% is a weird flow. I'm gonna use even lower. I usually go down to like 5%, 6%. If you start painting on this there. Let's put a white layer underneath it too, just so you can really see. Oops. It's kind of weird. That's because I'm also using a hard edge brush. Here we go. This is a better brush to illustrate it. A softer edge brush blends so much smoother than if you're trying to do a low opacity. You get a lot more of these areas here. All right, so anyways, I like using the low flow on my brush as much as I can. Yeah, not always the case, but when I'm going in somewhere here, I don't like to overdo it and get hard edges of where I've painted. So by using kind of this softer looking brush, I can paint in their faces and not have it be affected by the layer mask, or by the curves adjustment. All right. So next thing we have, just looking around at this image, there's a few like random tweaks that I want to make to it, just in general. Kind of furry coat here. I might clean up some of this mess. Some of these looks like they spilled something, so I'll get rid of some of that before I start doing these major adjustments. And then after that, I'll do skin tone adjustments and some color adjustments, and I can pretty much call this image good. So I'll just start really quick by going in, trying to clean up some of these little fuzz balls and whatnot. I'll probably use my spot healing brush now. It just selects an area, or selects that. It basically takes the area you selected, and I have it on content aware right now, so it looks around the area that I'm painting and picks the best choice of pixels to fill in wherever I just put in a brush stroke. It's like, I would say 90% effective. Sometimes if you get near another object with another color, it can't decide what to choose, and that looks kind of nasty. So just be aware of that and try to, just pick the areas that you can clean up easily. And I'm not trying to make his coat look, necessarily pristine. I still like when images hold on to some sort of, natural qualities and stuff, and, are a bit true to the eye. So yeah, I mean, I like that for right now. Let's go check out the other guy's coat too. Actually, a couple spots up here too. So it's pretty easy to just clean that up. Not usually a huge issue. This part might be a little bit more difficult because you do have the actual texture of the pocket here. If I get too close to that, I'm worried that it'll start trying to choose that area. Again, just so it doesn't look like a mess. Oops, so that did some weird things to the shadow there. Another thing you can do is clone stamp. Pick an area up here, like right there maybe, and reapply it. And again, I got that low flow on my brush, so as I'm painting in, it's blending it nicer. Okay. Let's see. So I'm just trying to do a general cleanup, retouching before I really get into the skin tones that I know I've been talking about all day. That's like the main thing that I want to show everyone today. It is kind of its own animal, and it makes perfect sense once you start looking at it and breaking it down. It's a really cool technique. Generally is known as frequency separation, which sounds really scientific and fancy. All it really is saying is that it's separating your textures from your colors, and you'll be able to edit them independently, which I'll also show why that's important before I get too far into it. So actually, let's just start right there. Let's start talking about editing skin. And there's a billion ways people out there edit skin. And, I'm not saying any way is necessarily much better than another. There's so many good ways to get great results. But this way I've found has been really helpful for me. So one thing for sure is if you're trying to edit the skin colors and say let's see. Let's find a good spot as an example. Well, notice how all of their skin has these kind of blotches of pink and red and stuff just from being outside, being cold. And it's not that I don't like it entirely. It makes sense for the weather. I think his face is going to be the best example for this, though. He's got these really rosy cheeks, really red nose. And if, I've seen people try it one way where they'll try to, let's see, basically copy down everything, get a new layer here. They've tried to essentially do another layer with everything on it and go and command U to desaturate the layer. And then they will put a mask over it and they will try to brush it out. This way has worked well for me in the past, not amazingly. And the reason why I don't think it's the greatest method is just because it's really easy to start making their skin look dead or artificial. And I mean, yeah, it's bringing down the color quite a bit, but it's really easy to paint outside the lines a bit and desaturate, something around him. And at the end of the day, he looks kind of ghosty, and I'm not a big fan of that ghosty face look. Yeah, did it desaturate it? Definitely. Do I think it looks as natural as it could be? Not quite. So instead of that, let's try. Delete this. And my phone is off the hook. So that was not the greatest route to do this, but I will start showing you frequency separations. That to me is what's up. So let's see. I'm gonna find. Okay, I'm gonna create a new layer again because I'm gonna be doing a major, universal edit to this layer, and I want to be non-destructive and always be able to hop back to the original. So I'm gonna first start by blurring this layer. I'm gonna use a Gaussian blur, which is basically it mimics the blur from being out of focus on a lens. So by doing a Gaussian blur, I really want to get it to the point just past where their skin starts to get blurry. And just where you start to lose texture and detail in the skin. So see that I have texture there, so I'm going to bring it just a little bit beyond that. Probably like right there is good. Okay, so I blur this layer. Then I am going to go back and I'm going to do another layer copy of the clean looking layer. And I'm going to put it above this layer, and I'm going to go up and high pass it. Now a high pass is the exact opposite of blur. It completely sharpens. It basically puts this like wash of gray over everything and brings out contrast in your edges and things. And I'm going to do this until I start getting a lot of texture back. So right around here. And then I believe if we use a soft light blend mode, it should basically compensate for the blur. So if that makes any sense. So what what I basically did here, I made it blurry first. Right? Made it so that I just lost texture in their skin. Then I brought a super sharp layer and put it on top so that, voila, I get the texture in their skin back. So basically, if you turn both these off, it should look almost identical to when they're both on. Now, actually, I'm not a huge fan of my high pass layer. I'm going to try one more. I'm going to make it a little bit sharper. But by putting a super sharp layer on top of a slightly blurry layer, they basically cancel each other out to make it look like just a normally sharp layer. So I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to go other to high pass. Oops, shoot. Just clicked the wrong thing. Other high pass. There we go. I'm going to raise up my high pass a little bit more, just for a little bit extra texture in there. And then if you go into your layer blending modes essentially they blend in the top layer into the bottom layer, but in the process, but the different options usually involve what is getting blended. So in some cases, if I were to do multiply, only the blacks get blended, or only the blacks stay visible. Pure whites get blended 100%. Blacks stay 100%. All the midtones, based on what percentage of black or white they are, get blended that percent. Screens, the opposite. The whites stay, the blacks get blended. Overlay is 50% gray. And soft light is, I believe, 50% gray plus like a certain percentage of white. So that way, when it blends, it looks a little bit more natural. So that's turned off, that's turned on. They look pretty much the same. I'm going to put them both in a folder. That way, I can put an adjustment layer on the entire group to tone it down after I've already edited it. I always like having things grouped into folders so that you can always like post applying your edits to them. You can look back at it and be like, did I overdo it or not? And if you did, then you can just lower your opacity on that folder and it'll apply it uniformly to all of the edits that you just made. Once again, I do have a Photoshop action for this. Right here in frequency separation. I'll even just go ahead. I'll turn mine off. I'll make an example of the action. Pretty much does it for me. A blur layer and a high pass layer. And again, just the action allows you to pick your blurriness to the point where you just start to lose your texture again, just like I did before. Cool. So I'm gonna hang out right around here, say OK, and great. It made me a wonderful frequency separation layer. And you know, if it's a little bit different here and there, you could always, in theory, mask out that area. But this frequency separation that we've just created now will allow me to edit just our blurry layer, which will affect our colors, or edit just our high pass layer, which will affect our textures. And it gives you a lot of control over that. And the way that you do the edits of the colors is really easy, actually. Let's find our groom here. And there's really no true science to how you do this, but it is pretty simple. I can pretty much grab here with our lasso tool, and I'm just going to more or less pick out blotches of color on his face and blur it further. So I'm just gonna make selections, and pretty random selection, but I'll try to do it within groups and try not to overlap, you know, like the glasses or things like that. But by just doing that and blurring it further, it actually spreads the color out so it blends evenly into the face. So it doesn't give them that ghosty look. It keeps the colors that were there. It just kind of like stretches them further along his face. So it makes it look less like a hard-edged blotch and more just like nice facial tones. All right, so we're gonna go in, we're gonna find this, we're gonna grab our lasso tool. Is this being silly? Let's try this out. Turn off all these. All right, back. Hold on a second. Make sure I'm on Photoshop. Oh. That's probably what was up. Okay, there we go. So a weird pop-up window from Google Hangouts that was being awkward. All right, so I'm going to take my lasso tool. I'm going to select this blotchy area of his face. Again, no true rhyme or reason to it, but that's one kind of big pink blotch. And I'm going to go back up. I can click on filter, go back to blur. And usually you want to blur it further than it was before. And you can even see in the blurred layer, it actually spreads out the color a little bit. But I usually like to blur it a little extra, so like about, to try to close to 8 there. And that is pretty much how you do it. I'm just gonna go ahead and do his whole face really quick, and then, I don't know if you just saw that, Command F essentially takes the last filter that you've used, and in this case that was blur. But yeah, in Command, or sorry, I'm gonna do his whole face here and just show you before and after. Might go over a couple spots again if I feel like I didn't blur them enough. And you can even do areas like his ear up here. And the nice thing is, because it doesn't really affect your texture, if you do happen to go over an area of texture, it shouldn't make a huge difference unless it's like a very, you know, minute detail. You might lose some of it, but for the most part. All right, so now I've done that to his face, and the other nice thing about having this in a folder is you can just turn the eye off and on the entire folder, and notice how a lot of like the weird blotches and stuff in his face have pretty much disappeared. Makes his skin look smooth, but if you look, you still see pores in his face, and you still see this kind of clear looking texture, and that is what is desired. Now, there's a little point here where, like, you know, I miss having the shadow right here on his cheek, and I miss, you know, maybe even the shadow inside of his ear a little bit. So I don't want to really, yeah. So let's, let me just see something. I use soft light, by the way, for my blending mode. Looks like the Photoshop action I have uses linear light. So I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but it actually does make a little bit of a difference. Allows more of the high pass layer through. But anyways, so I'm going to go back to this that I was working on. And yeah, if I want to bring back some areas in there, I can always just throw a mask onto this whole group, my frequency separation group that I've created. And I can paint back in a little bit of what I feel like I lost. So I can climb back up to his face here, take a brush, and I can gently paint it back in. So I'll get or I could do it on the actual individual mask as well. There we go. Cool. So bring back a little bit of that shadowy grit to his face. All right. I mean, that's majority of frequency separation. It's a lot of just kind of a little bit of guesswork. You know, you kind of pick the areas that you think might need to get smoothed out a little bit, and just Command F, and it blurs it out further. You can. My worry is it can get a little bit easy to overdo it, because it does kind of just happen really nice and easily and naturally and stuff. But then always just be sure to go back to your overall layer, turn it off and on again, and make sure you haven't affected too much of his face. So I'm gonna keep doing the same thing. I'm gonna go around to the other faces of the guys. His face, like I was saying earlier, his is probably the most, I don't know, in need of the frequency separation adjustments. So I can pick out this big blotch. I can blur it a little bit. And just pick out some areas here. On the other hand, because we do have the high pass layer, if say I want to edit texture instead of color, let's he might be a decent idea. Right, okay, so we're gonna look at him. Now he's got a few spots here up on his face. If I were to just go into my normal image, I'm going to turn off my frequency separation out right now, but if I were to go into my normal image, try to use the healing brush on his face here, right on these couple little pimples. Let's see why is that. Come on. What's going on with Photoshop today? What the heck? Oh, that's the problem. I still have the selection over on his face here. All right, sorry about that. Let's try this again. So if I go over to his face, and if I want to just try to use the healing brush on his face here, you can see it smooths it out. But sometimes you get these weird areas here where it kind of tries to pick some of the color from, like, I don't know, like his scruff over here and stuff like that, and apply it to where I put on the healing brush. And you can try to go over it a few more times, but it keeps trying to pick up these greens from his beard and put it up here on his cheek. And I don't want that. I want to just get rid of the dots. So again, I can go into my frequency separation. I can click on my high pass layer, and then I can just pick out the texture of that layer individually. So I don't know why it's being so troublesome right now. It's not even, nothing's. Layer mask. Let's try this one more time. Sorry. Hop in to here. Do I have the whole thing selected? Hey, all right. Let's do it. There we go. Wow, sorry that took forever. I don't know what was going on there. But if we go up into our high pass layer, we can basically remove those dots without affecting our color. That was all I was trying to say. But voila, cool. All right, so I think I did the two faces that needed it the most. His might need a little bit, as might his, but I'm just gonna move on. I did some frequency separation. I like the way it looks. And now I'm going to do some color adjustments. I'm just going to do that by opening up a brand new curves layer, because I like working with curves for my color. They just give you a lot of control. And today I'm going to be talking not just about the curves themselves, but also I will be talking about how to use them when referring to color. Okay, so notice if I go to red here, you gotta think histogram again, or sorry, color wheel again. Anyone who joined me last time, I did kind of go over this a little bit, but I'm gonna do it a little bit more in depth today. All right, so right now, the look that I'm going for, actually, I'm gonna start in blues. I want to add blues to their shadows. Just add these kind of blue element, kind of oomph into the shadows of their coats. And I want to keep reds in their faces with, again, I've already done the frequency separation, but I do still want to make their faces look alive. And I might do that with magentas a little bit as well. So we'll start with blues, and again, we got this big histogram. Notice all of our blues sit towards the darkers, or like kind of mid-tony area here. So I'm gonna grab some darker blues. I'm gonna put a point right in the center again. I only want to affect my darks at the moment. And I'm just gonna bring up my blue shadows a little bit. Cool. That looks so unnatural right now. Don't worry, we'll fix that. I'm gonna actually keep my highlights pretty much as is. I'm gonna keep those normal. All right, so we got blue shadows. Cool. And then let's go over to our reds, and I'm gonna put a point in our midtones here. I'm gonna bring some of our red up. Oops. I know this looks crazy right now, but trust me, I will explain how to make it look normal eventually. And so notice what I did here is I actually dragged up my red highlights a little bit. And actually, you know what? Instead of doing it on the histogram, what I might do, if you grab this corner here, see this little slider at the bottom moving? This guy? It's basically, so notice how as I pull down, it's adding reds to the highlights. If I pull up, it adds, or sorry, if I pull down, you're taking reds away from the highlights, adding it to, or adding cyan to them. Notice in their faces around here, it's getting more cyan. Now if I pull up, it's adding reds to the highlights and making our blues more cyan. I think that's kind of what I want. Or shadows more cyan, sorry. Now if you want to do it the other way around, if I drag this way, anything basically beyond this line that I'm creating, anything that is brighter than that will be added reds. And if I do it the other way around, starting from this corner, anything that is, anything that's darker than this will be added reds. Anything that is brighter than this line will be added the opposite of red, which is cyan. And vice versa. If I want to bring this up, anything darker than this will be added reds. Notice how all the reds are showing up in the shadows now. And anything darker or lighter than this will be added cyan. So it's kind of just the opposite way of working. But I want to add a little bit of reds to the highlights. So anything lighter than this line that I'm drawing will receive some reds. Okay, looks crazy right now. Bear with me, don't worry. We'll get there. Just gonna add a little bit of magenta to the whole thing as well. Magenta into the highlights and put a little bit of greens into the shadows. But then we go up into here into our blend if settings. And we're going to start with blue. So anything that is darker than this slider will get blended, so it won't show up as blue. And since blue's all in our shadows, that's where I want to start. And again, if you hold Alt and click this arrow, it'll split it so you don't get a hard line of where it starts blending. So I'm going to start blending right about here. I really want to have some blue in the shadows on their face and everything, but I don't want it to be, you know, completely fake. Cool. And then I definitely want to get it up in these highlights because I don't want any blues in the highlights at all. So I'm actually just going to drag this down just to combat any blues that might have shown up there. Okay, and then if we switch to reds, we will do the opposite. Don't really want to affect the highlights a whole lot right now. What we do want to affect is the shadows a little bit and keep any reds out of the shadows. And looking at this, I want a little bit more yellow in their faces because it was that late afternoon sun. You get the hard shadows to indicate it, but you're not getting the color, like the color to indicate it. So the opposite of blue is yellow. So by bringing in some opposite blue, of course, it brings in some yellow. Actually, keep this. And the other great thing about doing an adjustment layer is that you get stuff that comes with a prepackaged layer mask, where then notice how this guy's face just got super red. I'm just going to paint some of that out to make it look a little bit more like it did before. Same with his face over here. The other guys still look pretty all right. Cool. So if you see the color that I added, I really wanted to add some blue tones to it because, at least in my memory, and I like to think in the wedding party's memory, it was really, really cold that day. And I think just adding a little bit of blues adds to that kind of cool atmosphere of the day. Also kind of separates them from the red barn and tractor behind them. So I really like what it did to their clothes here and stuff. But yeah, all right. Another thing I'll do is, I might have overdone it just a little bit. I mean, I like the blues that I'm seeing in the coats and stuff, but I think the rest of the image could do with just a little bit of a lowered opacity. So I'll just drag it down just a hair. And I think I like where that wound up. Cool. So if we go back to our original image, you know what? I did like some of the shadows in the original image a little bit better. So that's actually a really easy fix. I can even go up to my curves layer that I've already got going right now, and I can just bring the shadows back down a little bit. I think I overdid it earlier when I first got started. And this just adds a little bit more of a, I don't know, kind of like a grungier feel to it, which I was what I was going for with the staging of the models and stuff. I almost wanted it to look like a band cover or something like that. But let us see. So next, what I'm going to try to do, I might just do another adjustment layer. And I want to try one where I desaturate some of the image, but I want to keep the skin tones and some of the highlights where they're meant to be, but I desaturate kind of like the neutrals and stuff. So let's see if I can figure out how to do that. So I'm going to actually go to hue saturation, and I'm going to start by desaturating it. Obviously, look at this. Oh my God, we're already losing our reds and our blues, which is fine because of our blend if layers. So yeah, right now I've got it pretty desaturated, and if you look, we're losing a lot of color pretty much all throughout the image. Makes it look a little vintage, I guess. And that's kind of what I'm gonna go for in the long run. But again, we can go under our blend ifs, and we can bring back some of our hues by blending it back in. So I'm bringing back some reds, just a little bit. And then I can go back and I can bring back our blues. Just a little bit. Really want to bring back those blues in the shadows. It just works so hard to create. And there's really not much green present whatsoever. So let's try that. So desaturated everything just a hair. And actually, yeah, I like the way that looks. I kind of like the grayed out sky a little bit. It's adding kind of this, I don't know, like I was saying earlier, like a little bit of like this vintage kind of appeal to it. Hello. All right. Cool. So this image is coming along. All right, 1 second. I'm gonna take a quick 5-minute breather. My parents just got home. We got a bunch of questions, but yeah, I hope people who are watching this, if there's anyone out there, hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're learning from it. If you have questions, feel free to drop some comments. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if there's anything you want to change. But yeah, leave messages while I'm gone. If I come back, just yeah, I'll be like just a minute. Okay. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So I did a little work on this image. I'm liking where it's at. I'm pretty happy with this image so far. I'm just I'm gonna dim it a little bit. Then the last thing I want to do is I want to sharpen it. then to sharpen it, I'm going to, actually no, this is the second to last thing. Last thing I want to do is I'll show you guys some basic dodging and burning. They'll really bring out a lot of the texture and overall like highlights and stuff. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. First, I'm gonna sharpen it, and to do that, I'm going to come up here. Actually, I'm gonna create a new layer, just a new copy of everything. Start fresh. Turn off all this again. So this is where I started. This is where I'm at. Doesn't look like a ton of difference, but I really like where it's come. All right. So then I'm going to create a copy of this layer, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to high pass this layer. Again, looks crazy scary. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a linear light layer blending mode. That looks crazy sharpened. I know, trust me. So we can do a couple things. We can bring down our opacity a little bit to cover that up slightly. And another thing we can do is once again go into our blend if, and this time we're going to deal with grays. So we can blend some of the grays from this image, which is a large percent of what a high pass layer is. And just blend it until, like, keeping more of the darks. But just blend it until we get to around here. And you can see it's way more sharp. Zoom in a little bit so you can see the difference. Really brings out some sharpness there. Cool. So now that I have sharpened the image, which really brings it a little bit more to life, the last thing I want to do is I want to dodge and burn. And I'll pretty much be done with this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a layer, and I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to start with white. I'm going to do just whites first. So dodging and burning is really simple, actually. Basically, anywhere that you want to bring the person's eyes, you want it to be lighter, you basically take your white brush, and again, I'm going to go with a super low flow. I'm going to go 100% opacity, but like 4% flow or something like this. And I'm going to find highlights that I want to, you guessed it, highlight. I'm just going to paint it. Paint it in. Oops. Doesn't look like I'm doing a whole lot. And it looks a little funky because I'm using white on top of them. But eventually we will use a blend mode. Looks like these guys could still use frequency separation on their skin as well. I kind of avoided them. This looks a little bit more natural right now because I did use it on him. So you're going in with white on all these highlights that you really want to accentuate. Like his nose right here. Back of his hand even. Points on his knuckles. Tractor tires, why not? It's just gonna add overall contrast to the image. That's probably too much. Too dark being there. I can do it into his coat. Actually, just change one little thing in my brushes right now. Make my minimum diameter of my brush a little bit larger. Now I'm straight up painting white onto a black coat, which seems a bit counterintuitive. I'm going to fix one more thing with my brushes. I'm going to take transfer flow jitter. I'm going to put flow jitter to pen pressure. So basically, depending on how hard I push, determines how much it's actually going to lay down for me. That way, if I paint really lightly, I'm actually going to erase this big blotch I did on the black here. It's probably not going to read too well. But I'm going to keep going back into these pleats of the guy's pants. And I'm just painting on an empty layer right now. I'm just painting white. Oops. Oh shoot, I totally clicked it wrong. Okay. Where's brush. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I'm just gonna paint back into these guys' pants. Find these areas that can be highlighted. Not like I really need to highlight the pants, but just anywhere that has whites, you can essentially start going in. If it's an area of relative importance, which I think, do I think his pants are essential to this image? Like, it would be weird if he wasn't wearing them, but they're important because it's just part of the subject. And because they're readily visible. All right. Cool. So now we're going to pop out, and it looks a little freaky right now. But if we go to soft light, it blends it all in very nicely and makes a big difference. So we can do another layer. Same thing, except we'll do our blacks. And we'll pick our darker areas and kind of start painting along those. Get the shadowy side of his face, add a little bit of contour there, get up here in his hat. So it's pretty easy doing dodge and burn. It's just, I'm actually not even dodging and burning, technically. I'm just using a normal brush, but it's just painting blacks on blacks and white on white. And, if you paint a black over a white area because you want to accentuate it less, like, I don't know if I like this far end of his cheek here. I'm going to paint a little black there, and that'll hide that a little bit. I can paint a little black over part of his hand if I think it's coming across as too white. Or vice versa, if there's an area of the blacks, like I was missing part of his face and I wanted to paint a little white on there to bring it out some more, I could do that. But ultimately, that's the trick. So then I can go back down. I can do a soft light overlay. And that's without dodge and burn. That's with dodge and burn. It's harder to see in an image like this where it's a little bit zoomed out, but when you're doing an actual close-up of somebody's face or something, it really makes a solid difference. But yeah, there you have it. Another pretty much finished image that I've edited. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it kind of helped out. Once again, if anyone has questions, feel free to leave them. But for the most part, I might call it quits for today. I hope it was a help. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Wednesday night. And I will be back next week doing pretty much the exact same thing. I might try to mix it up a little bit. And if any of you watch this and you want to try editing photos on your own, you know, and you know, show off like what you've done, feel free. You can add me on Facebook. My name is Nick Cartwright. You can like my photo page, Nick Cartwright Photography, or send me an email at nickcartwrightphoto.com. Any of the above, you can show me your images. If you have an image that you want me to edit, I would be happy to. I love editing and stuff. It's really something that I've started opening up my eyes to and things, and I can try to pick out what I want to do to it, how I can help you improve your image and things like that. So feel free, send things my way, send me questions. But yeah, thanks, and I hope you guys have a great night.